15 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading.
Without objection, the gentleman from Indiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I rise in strong support of the Blueprint for a Balanced Budget, the Republican Study Committee's substitute amendment that will expand opportunities for middle-class families, grow our economy, and strengthen our national defense. First of all, I want to say I appreciate Chairman Price and his hard work on the budget that is being presented from the Republican conference, and looking forward to the continued debate as we make sure that we look forward to strengthening our economy and America. Mr. Chairman, it's very clear we are on the wrong path. Despite improving indicators, folks across the country know that our economic recovery has been sluggish at best. Over 90 million Americans are not participating in the workforce, wages are stagnant, and businesses are struggling with the uncertainty tax or regulation is waiting for them just around the corner. No matter how many stimulus packages, shovel-ready jobs, summer recoveries the president promises, things aren't getting better fast enough. Unfortunately, on many fronts, the fundamentals are getting worse. Since President Obama took office, our national debt has increased by 70% and has now soared past $18 trillion. To make matters worse, the president's recently proposed budget calls for even more taxes and even more spending and never, ever balances. Fortunately, we now have a choice. We can continue down the road President Obama wants us to with a reckless tax and spend agenda that will add $8.5 trillion to our debt and does nothing to reform our soon-to-be bankrupt social safety nets, or we can decide to make the bold and necessary decisions our constituents sent us here to make. With the Republican Studies Committee blueprint, we can fix our broken system, and we can build a better future for the American people. We do this by addressing our nation's challenges head-on. First, it's clear we must change Washington's out-of-control spending habits. If we don't, by 2023, we could be spending more money paying off the interest on our debt than we do on our national defense. I'd like to show you a chart, Mr. Chairman. As you can see, under the president's plan, because of the addiction to borrowing, our federal government continues to rack up more interest payments year after year. Keep in mind that this is money that we have to pay as a federal government, that we cannot go to a line item and say, we're going to cut that particular payment. We have to pay the interest on our debt. This is locked in due to our borrowing. In fact, under CBO's projections, if our interest rates on government notes increase by just 1% for 10 years, this expense could go up by a whopping $1.75 trillion. And I'd like to show this particular last year in the 10-year window. This particular bar is $785 billion alone, much more than what our defense spending would cost. We have to act, and with the RSC blueprint, we do. Our budget cuts $7.1 trillion in federal spending over the next decade and balances the budget in 6 years. The only way we're going to ever start paying our debt is if we get to a balanced budget. By enacting common sense reforms, we're able to have a surplus. By year 2021, we will have a surplus so we can start paying that debt down. And if you look at the president's budget, you will never, ever see a balanced budget, and so we'll never, ever deal with our debt. In addition, our budget puts forward a pro-growth set of tax reforms that will make the tax code simpler, fairer, and more competitive. We do this by lowering rates and simplifying brackets. We reduce taxes on small businesses and corporations, and we encourage money that is setting overseas to return home by transitioning to a fairer, smarter territorial tax system. To get the government out of 1/6 of America's economy, through reconciliation, our plan repeals Obamacare in full. But however, we replace it. We replace the failed law with the American Health Care Reform Act, a patient-centered, free market, and affordable way to provide health care for all Americans. This act allows individuals and families to deduct health care costs, expand access to health savings accounts, and creates options and choices for Americans to purchase their coverage across state lines. Our budget also strengthens national defense. Our federal government's primary role, number one constitutional responsibility, is the defense of the nation. By providing our men and women in uniform with $570 billion in our base defense budget, we are able to ensure our military has the resources it needs to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Mr. Chairman, in 1962, discretionary programs made up a majority of government spending. Today, it's the reverse. So-called mandatory programs, like we see right here, are on autopilot, and this makes up 2/3 of the budget. As you can see, these programs are on a clock. We can see that Social Security disability insurance goes bankrupt in 2016. Social Security, retirement for Americans all across the country, goes bankrupt in 2034. And of course, Medicare isn't too far behind that, is actually in front of Social Security, and goes bankrupt in 2030. The clock is ticking, Mr. Chairman, and we need to do something sooner rather than later. This is very predictable, and it's very preventable if we act now. The President doesn't do that. In contrast, our plan does. It makes the critical structural reforms necessary to preserve these entitlement programs for current and future seniors. Let's not let the solvable problems of today become the causes of decline tomorrow. Let's stand together and let's pass a serious budget through a serious conversation that reforms the way Washington operates. Let's pass a budget that will allow opportunities for middle-class families to flourish. Let's pass a budget that will keep America strong for years to come at home and abroad. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Indiana reserves.